There's something that the US media still hasn't admitted about Jungkook, something so obvious that fans, industry professionals, and even competing artists quietly recognize it. It's not just that he's successful. It's not that he's talented or global or famous. Those things are acknowledged daily. What they don't want to admit is that Jungkook has crossed a threshold no one in his position was ever meant to cross. He's become the standard for what a modern global pop artist looks like. And that's a truth many Western outlets still hesitate to say out loud. When the US talks about global pop stars, the conversation usually circles back to the same archetypes. American-born artists with familiar industry trajectories starting local, signed to a label, marketed with formulaic precision. But Jungkook's rise doesn't fit that pattern. He didn't follow their system. He redefined it. And for many, that's uncomfortable to confront. Because if they admit that Jungkook has set a new global bar, it means the US-centric model of pop success isn't at the center anymore. That's the truth. The US media still won't fully admit that Jungkook is not just a participant in the global music conversation, he's the axis around which that conversation now turns. When Jungkook released 7 and later Standing Next to You, the reaction wasn't limited to fan excitement. It triggered a quiet shift in the industry. American media could no longer treat him as a K-pop star entering the US. He was charting higher, selling faster, and resonating broader than artists who had entire American infrastructure backing them. Yet, instead of calling it what it was, dominance headlines softened it. K-pop star makes Billboard history, or BTS member breaks streaming records. Always framed with a label, as if success from an Asian artist still needed a category, an explanation, a qualifier. That reluctance to simply call him what he is, a global superstar without borders, reveals more about the system than about Jungkook himself. It's about control of narrative. The US media has long defined the language of pop culture, deciding who gets called mainstream, who gets called international, and who gets called niche. Jungkook blurred those lines, and in doing so, disrupted the very hierarchy of acknowledgement. Because here's what's undeniable. Jungkook didn't need the US system to succeed in it. He entered on his own terms, already armed with talent, global reach, and credibility that no PR campaign could manufacture. His presence on US late-night shows, award ceremonies, and radio wasn't the result of traditional gatekeeping. It was the system trying to catch up with him. And yet, the media still stopped short of saying it outright. Jungkook isn't just breaking into America. America is already chasing him. The reason this truth is difficult to admit is simple. It disrupts a century-old narrative where cultural influence flows one way, from west to east. Jungkook's trajectory reverses that flow. His music travels effortlessly, not because he adapts to the US sound, but because he transcends it. 7, with its fluid pop structure, wasn't just a summer hit, it was a recalibration of what an international pop release could sound like when not dictated by American production norms. It was smooth, clean, and addictive, but also emotionally grounded. And it connected across demographics that most Western pop acts can only dream of, from fans in Seoul to London, Sao Paulo to Los Angeles. The media often attributes his success to the power of the fandom. It's the safest explanation. And while BTS's global fanbase is undeniable, this logic misses the point. Fans amplify what's real. They don't fabricate resonance. What the media refuses to say is that Jungkook connects because he embodies something pop music has lacked for years: sincerity. In an era where many artists are built on image management, Jungkook's authenticity, his quiet ambition, his discipline, his humanity has become his global language, and that's something no PR team can engineer. The US media system, which thrives on personality packaging, finds this unsettling. Because Jungkook isn't a product of its machinery, he's an artist who proved that music and truth can travel further than marketing strategies. Every award, every record, every viral clip is evidence of that. But the real reason they hesitate to call him the global standard is that admitting it means conceding that Western dominance in pop culture is no longer automatic. Jungkook's success represents the first true shift in modern pop, a shift where influence isn't measured by location, but by reach and emotional authenticity. When a Korean artist becomes the face of one of America's most iconic brands, tops its charts, and commands its stages, all while staying unmistakably himself, it forces an uncomfortable question. Is the US still leading the conversation? Or is it now following? For Jungkook, none of this was calculated. His career has always moved through natural evolution from BTS's youngest member to global solo icon. But every move he made carried weight. His vocal tone, his choreography, his image, they are not just technically refined, they're emotionally coherent. The US media praises performance excellence when it's seen in artists they've nurtured, yet they often treat Jungkook's perfection as a cultural phenomenon instead of pure artistry. That framing keeps him at a distance. And that's exactly what this conversation is about: distance. The distance between what he is and what they're willing to admit. If Jungkook were an American-born artist with the same talent, discipline, and success, he'd be the headline of every major entertainment publication for months. He'd be described as a generational icon, a pop visionary, a record-breaking voice of a new era. Instead, what we often see is hesitance, not in admiration, but in acknowledgement. Because to admit Jungkook's full position means recognizing that the global center of pop music has already shifted eastward, and he's standing at its core. And maybe that's the quiet truth the US media isn't ready to face. Jungkook didn't just join global pop culture, he became its most credible representative. His voice isn't localized. His sound isn't filtered through Western adaptation. His artistry isn't defined by geography. It's universal. And when something or someone becomes universal, no one can own the narrative anymore. What's striking about Jungkook's rise isn't only the magnitude of his success, it's the silence that surrounds it, from the very institutions that used to define success itself. In American media, acknowledgement often comes packaged with ownership. When an artist breaks through, headlines frame it as something discovered or validated by US culture. But Jungkook's rise dismantles that structure entirely. He didn't need discovery, he didn't need validation, and that independence is what unsettles them most. For decades, US entertainment outlets have acted as gatekeepers of global recognition. They decided who was mainstream and who was foreign. But Jungkook didn't enter through their gates. He built his own world and made the audience follow him there. The moment Seven debuted, Western media didn't launch him. They reacted to him. The Billboard charts, late-night TV, brand campaigns all came after his global dominance had already taken shape. Yet, many articles framed him as breaking into the US market, as if he had just arrived. In truth, the US market had been running to catch up. This hesitation to give him unqualified recognition reveals something deeper, a reluctance to admit that cultural power has shifted. American pop culture was built on the illusion that every global artist eventually needed to make it in the US to be considered universal. Jungkook destroyed that idea by proving that universality no longer requires US approval. His reach didn't expand because the American system lifted him up. It expanded because fans across continents saw in him a clarity that transcends borders, a mix of precision, emotion, and humility that American pop often struggles to replicate. Jungkook doesn't just sing, he embodies every stage of what artistry should be. His voice, equal parts control and vulnerability, carries emotion with surgical accuracy. There's no excess, no artificial drama. That kind of performance discipline, combined with natural emotional resonance, creates a connection that doesn't depend on language. It's why his live performances are streamed, analyzed, and replayed millions of times, not because fans are searching for spectacle, but because they're witnessing honesty, and honesty has no nationality. The problem for the US media is that Jungkook's honesty exposes the superficiality of their usual narratives. In their world, artists are often celebrated for controversy, persona, or shock value. But Jungkook's artistry leaves no space for distraction. He's too real, too precise, too disciplined, the kind of artist who reminds the world that music is a craft before it's a performance. That's not a narrative American outlets easily know how to handle, especially when it comes from someone outside their cultural ecosystem. Instead, they label him K-pop star, BTS member, Asian artist. Each label narrows what should be expanded. Each headline limits what should be limitless. Because if they ever remove the label and speak about him the same way they speak about American icons, the illusion of Western dominance disappears completely. That's what they're protecting, the comfort of control, not the truth of recognition. But the irony is that Jungkook himself never chased their acknowledgement. He didn't alter his sound to fit their charts. He didn't adjust his visuals to mimic their trends. Even his Calvin Klein campaigns, though positioned within American fashion, still carry an unmistakably Korean sensibility, quiet confidence, precision, and self-awareness without exaggeration. It's proof that authenticity, not adaptation, is the new global language. And that's what scares the media most. Because Jungkook's success suggests a future where no artist has to conform to Western expectations to reach a global audience. It suggests a pop landscape where creativity isn't filtered through cultural dominance but driven by universal connection. The old rules English lyrics, American radio play, Western collaborations no longer define legitimacy. Jungkook proved that excellence can define itself. When the US media avoids naming him the standard, it's not because they don't know it's true. It's because they can't claim credit for it. They can't rewrite his success as part of their narrative. For them, Jungkook represents a generation that found power outside the American structure, and that independence isn't just rare, it's revolutionary. There's also something more personal about why they hesitate. Jungkook doesn't fit into the archetype of the Western pop idol. He's not scandal-driven, he's not loud, and he doesn't play into controversy for relevance. His presence on stage is commanding but never arrogant. Off stage, he's grounded, reserved, focused, authentic. In a landscape where media cycles thrive on chaos, Jungkook gives them nothing to exploit. They can't sensationalize what's calm, and they can't dramatize what's consistent. So they minimize instead. That's why articles rarely use the language that his numbers deserve. 7 wasn't treated as a cultural reset, even though it surpassed multiple streaming records and went head-to-head with major US releases and won. Standing Next to You wasn't dissected as a vocal masterclass, though vocal coaches and producers across continents publicly praised its precision. Instead, these achievements were treated as surprising, as if excellence from a Korean artist should still be a novelty. That tone's subtle disbelief is the barrier Jungkook keeps breaking, over and over, and each time he does, the silence grows louder. What makes this silence even more telling is how other industries have already caught up. The fashion world, for instance, had no hesitation in naming him a global icon. Calvin Klein didn't brand him as a regional face or a special edition ambassador. They gave him full authority not just to represent the brand, but to reshape its visual language. His campaigns weren't about adapting to him, they were about letting him lead. The result? Record-breaking engagement, cultural relevance, and a new standard for fashion campaigns worldwide. If global brands can see it, if millions of people can feel it, why can't the media say it? The truth is, they already know it, but admitting it changes too much. Admitting Jungkook as the current standard means accepting that the US pop industry is no longer the exclusive center of gravity. It means acknowledging that a Korean artist, singing in multiple languages, commanding billions of streams, and redefining brand identity across continents, is not an outsider, he's the blueprint. And for an industry built on controlling who becomes the blueprint, that's a loss of power they can't easily concede. Still, the irony persists the harder they try to frame him as an exception, the more he becomes the rule. Every move Jungkook makes sets new expectations for what global artistry looks like. Every performance reinforces the idea that precision and authenticity outweigh hype. Every silence from the media only amplifies his relevance, because the audience no longer needs validation from headlines to recognize greatness. The conversation has shifted, whether the media admits it or not. Jungkook doesn't exist within the Western system. The Western system now orbits around him.